Welcome to the Atheist for Liberty podcast. My name is Peter Clarke. I'm the head of editorial for Atheist for Liberty. Today I'm speaking with Serina Vadella, who recently deconverted from Judaism and became an atheist. Serina, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to do a little bit of a series on folks who recently deconverted from the religion and became an atheist. And we want to kind of explore that territory. And I'm really excited to talk to you today because I have not spoken to many people who come from Judaism as a religious background. You know, there are a lot of like Christians who often come onto this channel, but this is going to be exciting for me because it's the first time I'm talking to somebody who's straight out of Judaism. So tell me a little bit about your religious background and how big of a deal was religion in your life up to the point where you deconverted?
So I grew up very Reformed Jewish, which means that my family, my dad being Catholic and my mother being Jewish, we didn't have much emphasis on Jewish law in our home and observing Jewish law. But I did attend a Sunday school at Chabad, which is a Hasidic sect. It's an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic sect within Judaism. So I did attend and have exposure to Orthodox lifestyles. And then when I was in university, I got more involved in Chabad. And I eventually became so involved that they said I should go to seminary in Israel, which would have been a very immersive experience where I learn about the Jewish philosophy with other young people. And there's not an expectation to become more religious, but most girls who are in this program obviously are there for the purpose of learning more to equip themselves with the knowledge to apply that in their life when they leave the seminary.
So when you say you became more involved, do you mean that it was a social thing, or was it you felt like more close to God sort of thing? Was it very spiritual, or how exactly would you describe that?
It's interesting because I actually would just go to Chabad and I didn't have many friends there. I just went for myself. I think it was the pursuit. Most of my life has been the motivation, the pursuit of knowledge has motivated a lot of my actions. And so I think going there, they offered Jewish classes on the state of Israel, on Jewish philosophy, all sorts of concepts. And eventually, I thought, I was attending at one point 2 classes a week. And they said, you already do this so much and you're balancing it on top of university. Why not do a program designed entirely to learn about these subjects 5 days a week? And so it wasn't even necessarily a social thing for me. I think I had felt the idea of like a soul, right? They believe that the more you learn these concepts that come from the Torah, the more you activate your soul, the more you're connected to the essence of yourself. So they believe like being Jewish is inherent to your identity. And so the more you learn Jewish concepts, you're activating that internal piece of what they call God inside of every Jewish person. And so I had really, I suppose, internalized that concept and thought, I feel so great when I learn these concepts. I do feel like I am connecting to a part of my soul, which concept of soul now, I would say I'm not a big believer in that concept, but the idea of a soul is very, very prominent in Judaism. And so the idea that I would be immersing my soul right into an environment that is meant to nourish it was very attractive. So I applied. Okay. And I eventually, went to.
Is this a little bit on a path to becoming a very Orthodox Jew? Or, I mean, in my mind, this is me coming from a Protestant background and just not knowing too much about this. In my mind, there's a very hard split between, at least in America, very liberal Jewish people and then like the Orthodox people that you see in New York City wearing things that you're like, oh, that's a Jewish person. I mean, like, is that split as black and white as I might conceive it to be, or is it more like a gray area? And which direction were you headed there?
So it's interesting. What you're referring to, I suppose, would be the Satmar, which is another Hasidic sect, and they do live like Williamsburg mostly, and they have the stripe, that fur hat. I know what you're talking about. So there are differences within each Orthodox sect. So the one I was part of is obviously less insular. In fact,
Okay.
the Chabad is all about outreach. They have a concept known as shluchos or shluchot, which is the idea that you're like an emissary, the philosophy of Chabad, and that you it's like marketing. You seek to get as many new recruits as you can into this philosophy. But the thing is, because it's so into outreach, they offer a lot of scholarships for people who don't grow up in the environment, because they want to bring more people in who want to learn more. And there's a concept known, I was called what was a Bala Teshuva, right? Master of the way. It's like when it's like you didn't grow up in a religious environment and you want to learn more, so they call you're called that, and it's like seen as, it's a very interesting thing, because you rejected the modern ideas because you see the beauty of Torah, and you really want to connect your soul to something higher than yourself, and this is the true essence of your being, because they see it as you're just returning to your soul, you're returning to yourself, essentially. Right, master of return, it might be translated to in Hebrew. Okay. And so what the school I went to in Israel was for were girls called Bala Teshuvas, girls who did not really grow up necessarily religious, but now they want to learn more. And so the sect that I'm talking about in the black and white divide would be that there are more insular communities and there are less insular communities. So the one I was involved in was more into getting people not from as religious backgrounds, in getting them to learn more. And I mean, obviously the goal would be to get you to become more religious, so then you can support the movement of Chabad and continue to proliferate their ideas in
so yeah, going to Israel and having this experience, it sounds kind of awesome, and it does sound very intellectually rewarding. But was it during this time that you started questioning the faith, or was it afterwards?
I would say that I wasn't, I mean, in university, I was learning about these concepts maybe a year and a half for the duration of my studies. I wouldn't say I was fully convinced that this was the way to be living my life, like that everything I was learning I should apply to my life. I was definitely, certain, like, that there was a God, and that what I was doing, I became part of that Jewish collective. And I remember feeling it was very rewarding to be part of a community where people are in something together to accomplish a goal, right? Because the idea is each deeds of virtue, mitzvahs or commandments, right? There's 613 commandments in the Torah.
That's a
lot. And so, but don't worry, they pick and choose. Not all of them even apply modern day.
That's good.
So some of them were not even applicable today, but the mitzvahs that we do, they would say, bring light into the world. And there's, in Protestantism, Jesus is said to have a second coming, but here in Judaism, there hasn't been a Messiah to come yet. So the idea is that the Messiah in Judaism will come soon, but we don't know when that will be. And in doing these mitzvahs, these commandments, we are bringing the Messiah closer and closer to coming. So everyone is the idea together to bring the Messiah. And that's part of the reason why Chabad invests so much money into getting as many Jews as they can, because the more mitzvahs they do, they see that as bringing more light into the world. So when I talk about being convinced by that, I would say it was strange how the more I immersed myself in the environment, the more my actions started to reflect perhaps that kind of idea of like being a missionary for the religion, in a sense, to other Jews. Like when I was 20 years old, 19 years old in my spring semester, my last term at university, there was a Jewish guy that I knew in my class. I literally that day learned he was Jewish. And I already, like, after class was like, hey, you want to come to a Shabbat dinner? Like, I didn't even know who this person was. And I remember thinking, why do I care? Why am I like trying to get him to do something he probably doesn't care about? So it really like contradicted my intellect, because I felt myself to be very intellectual. So a lot of the time I was just in this struggle thinking that I really don't believe this, but yet why do I feel impelled to reach out to people I don't even know and get them to do things they don't probably want to do? And so when I was in the seminary, that was even more immersive. And I So when I was in the seminary in Israel, the war started in Israel, and that caused a lot of identity.
October 7th.
Yeah, October 7th, I was in
Okay.
Israel,
I
and
didn't realize that. That's crazy.
yeah, I was so
Was that
the
scary? I mean, what was that like?
yeah, so I when I was there, the Chabad seminary, to explain Chabad, they every Hasidic sect of Judaism has what's called a Rebbe, a spiritual leader. So the Rebbe is the one who like advises that movement, and he's seen as a very righteous person. So the Rebbe died 30 years ago, but the Rebbe, they still take him at his word even long after he's been dead. I so many tangents about that as well, but there is like a website, basically like a magic 8 ball for the Rebbe. There's a website where you can ask a question, and then it will like basically AI will give you a list of either like a speech, a book, a writing that the Rebbe did sometime in his lifetime, and it will be like a response to your question, like 30 like decades after.
That's awesome. Martha Stewart has that too.
What has it to?
Martha Stewart.
Oh, Martha Stewart. So in the sense when I
Maybe
was
not as profound. I'm not too sure, but I've heard it's good.
so in the seminary in Israel, when the war had started, the seminary gave us a big assembly, about 100 girls in the assembly, and they were saying that the Rebbe said that the land of Israel is the safest place for a Jew to be, and they advised us not to leave. And I remember thinking like I don't feel safe. It
Mm.
was like given to me that, oh, the Rebbe is this figure who has very all-knowing knowledge. Like he has somehow prophetic knowledge. Sometimes people would say that he would tell someone not to get on a plane, and the plane was hijacked later. And people has said, oh, it's unexplainable. How does he know these? How does he know these things? How does he know these things? And so
Boy,
people,
this is interesting. This is a whole component to Judaism I wasn't even aware of. Is this common? Like a guy like this with this authority?
every Hasidic sect has a Rebbe. And so
Okay, okay,
the
interesting.
Rebbe in Chabad died 30 years ago, and there were 7 generations of Rebbe, and because it's representative of the 7 millennia. Like I said,
Okay, yeah.
so the 7 days of creation, 7 generations of Rebbe, like it all basically at the end of the Rebbe, when he died, people thought the Messiah would come. Like they would be at his grave and
Okay.
Messiah would come. See, the idea is that since he has died, he was part of the 7th generation, which is the generation of the coming of the Messiah. And so
I
he
do see how this could maybe start to get in your brain, like maybe there's some bullshit here.
there's the explanations, the numbers, the so I'm at the
Yeah,
seminary.
walk me through this. I'm so curious how this. What was your eureka moment, and what led up to that? We're like, yeah, I'm skeptical now.
When I had entered the seminary in Israel, I had tried to be very like open. I was, what I had already been learning for maybe a year, 2 years about their concepts, and I wanted to learn more. And I think I had this idea that my family heritage I wanted to reconnect with, and so I thought all these traditions that I don't I don't do with my family because we're just the product of very reformed Jews in America, very common, and I wanted to reconnect with that, and so I was open to learning more. And it was also not only like an academic study, religious texts, but I remember my seminary roommate saying to me that, well, then what are you even doing here if you don't plan to apply what you're learning? I remember that and thinking, yeah, what am I doing here? I remember thinking that, like, after she said that, like, I had a lot of reflection for a few weeks there in seminary. And then on Yom Kippur, which is the highest, holiest day in the Jewish calendar, where you're meant to fast for 25 hours, don't use any technology, and you're meant to just really pray and atone for your sins and ask God that you give him he gives you a good year in the Book of Life. I've never seen the Book of Life, but apparently it's there. It's up there somewhere. And that when you atone for your sins and you ask for good things for the coming year, then those are all sealed on Yom Kippur. And so on Yom Kippur, I had found Anthem by Ayn Rand in the library, this bookshop. And I remember I didn't want to go down and pray. I'd never done that before on Yom Kippur, like praying all day. So I'm up in my room and I'm reading Anthem by Ayn Rand, And I'm thinking, like,
That's so funny.
I was just like so hungry and so thirsty. And I remember reading the book and reflecting on it as I was reading it, like, what am I doing here? Why am
She
I
was quite anti-God. Like she was a very like religious rebel type of figure, as I remember, right?
very like the ideas of Anthem were the to reject collectivism. That I
Okay, yeah.
maybe to boil it down, like rejecting collectivism, and so the girls would check on me and be like, I know it's your first fast, Serina, but you could come down and pray just for the end of it. We're almost done. I remember like it was I never forget like after finishing Anthem and being like, does this all contradict with everything I'm doing in my life? And I go down and I'm at the top of the stairs, like 100 girls all like praying in unison. And I'm thinking about like, what is my role here? Why am I here in the seminary? I had like reflected a lot of the decision that led me to go to seminary. I think, was it all for curiosity? I mean, what benefit does that grant me? If I'm sacrificing what could be better use of my time or something more in line with reality. I mean, I remember thinking that like, does this change kind of a lot of things? Because they also have Yom Kippur is one fast day, but they have, I think, 4 fast days in Judaism. And so there's one day, like a half fast that started in morning to sundown. And I remember like that day, just thinking like, why don't I just eat something? I was kind of, I was like looking at
Very practical question, yeah.
yeah, but
Like what actually happens? Like does God smite you or something? Or just like is it bad? You feel guilty? Like if for someone who's like way deep into this, if they eat something, they like snack on a Snickers like in a closet, like what happens? Is it just guilt or
I would say that so if they believe that like every hour you keep Shabbat brings another light into the world, the idea that like everything you do to observe the Torah as much as you can brings goodness into the world, but it's immeasurable, you cannot see it. There's no being able to prove it false, right? So this goodness that you cannot see, I think that there's something called a nevera, which is like a sin, I guess to translate it, a sin, right? So when you do something bad, they told us that you're bringing darkness into the world. And so the Jews are meant to be like in the Torah, they say the Jews are the light unto other nations. Like we are the model for light in across the world. And so if you're doing these actions, you're bringing darkness into the world. And if you're meant to be the model and you're not even doing that, then what does it say for everyone else? Like if you're not modeling that good behavior, I mean, it goes a lot deeper than that, I'm sure, but the idea that, yeah.
So you're probably supposed to like really reflect on your behaviors and your selfishness or something like that, right?
It's
maybe.
like, they try to frame it very, like it's based on your individual choice. They try to frame it like Judaism is a very individual religion. That's what they say. Like everyone practices in their own way. But I mean, does everyone? Or do you like tell me that I have to do this, and if I don't, I'm meant to reflect in my own way? I mean, if I was looking at these cookies on the half fast day, and I remember thinking, if I just take a little crumb, and they were like, they were telling me
this is good.
They were saying like, according to Jewish law, if you take like a smidgen, like I can't even remember, they were like showing me with their finger, like the size of food that you can eat on a fast day that doesn't count, something like that. So I remember just like, but you have to wait like 15 minutes in between each crumb. It's just so arbitrary. But they were like, you have to wait 15 minutes in between each crumb, and then that is permissible according to the Torah. And so I remember like having a crumb and then checking the clock and then having a crumb. Just like sitting, I didn't want because my roommate and I were meant to share the cookies, and so I didn't want her to know that I had taken so much, because calculated if you calculated it, the crumbs were not equivalent to 15-minute increments. intervals. And so I remember like being nervous and then just just eating enough of it like right as the fast broke so that she could never be like, you ate more than the crumbs. Um, so there's just a lot of really arbitrary Jewish law that you have to like almost in you it's so against nature to follow them.
So maybe here's my question on this is how did you go from seeing the arbitrariness of these certain rules at this certain school facility to there's no God in the universe, like, or very likely God doesn't actually exist. For me personally, I did have a eureka moment where I was like, I think this is all bullshit. But it took me like a couple years like 5 years or so before I was like, maybe I should call myself an atheist because I'm kind of like technically across that line. But it was like a long time. It seems like for you it happened pretty quickly from like seminary school to all of a sudden like, oh, I'm on an atheist podcast, right? Like how did that happen so quickly for you?
Like the higher you go, the lower you fall. Maybe.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
I would
Right.
say because I was in an ultra orthodox seminary surrounded by, very, very religious people in a religious community, the constant pressure and the enforcement of the rules, I would say it wasn't like you could live your life separate from it. Like I was immersed. I was in a religious institution. I would say I had to make a choice. The choice wasn't to just exist in the seminary and still live by my own principles. No, because the laws of the seminary that were being enforced were associated with, it wasn't a secular law. I wasn't allowed to wear pants. I wasn't allowed to have non-kosher food. Things that were enforced were not like secular rules that I could just say, oh well, that makes sense, because I could see that for our safety, because there was a curfew, but that's not a law associated with Torah. So I can rationally understand that law. And I had told the woman who ran the seminary, I said, well, like this law, I can understand curfew, sure, but things like the pants, things like the non-kosher food, and she said, we have a standard here, and it's a standard that people see our seminary and they think, what are those girls doing? They don't even appear to be, following the Torah, because it's all appearance. If you're wearing the clothes, who knows what you do like outside of that, or while you're still wearing the clothes. A lot of people in the community, they dressed a certain way, but they didn't act in reflection of that way that they dressed. So
right.
You can't.
That all resonates with me a lot because I remember when I was religious, I was pretty young at the time, but I was thinking, if I'm going to believe this, I'm going to believe the whole thing and like take it very seriously, or else what's the point, like at all? And then I realized once you do take it very seriously, you do realize that there's so many contradictions and just a lot of it just simply doesn't make sense. And just, we know it's anti-science at a certain level, or, contradicts what we've learned from science over the last couple hundred years. And then so you have to start watering it down. But once you start watering it down, there's no like rational place to stop. And then you might as well just dump the whole thing eventually, which I think is what happens to a lot of people in modern times. Like, if we're going to water it all down, what are we even doing here, guys? That sort of a thing.
And that was the very strong conviction of Chabad. Why would we follow half of the Torah or a third of the Torah? We're going to follow it fully for what it is. Like that is a very strong belief. So if that's also in the Christian faith, I'm sure they'd want you to, in conversion, they don't recognize a non-Orthodox conversion, because why would you want to convert to a religion you only want to follow a little bit of? And so it's very full blown, but yet they'll still say, oh, everyone practices in their own way and people are at different levels, is what they'll say a lot of the time to like rationalize that. So everything was like rationalizing things that were just inherently irrational. That's one thing that led me a lot to break away from it, because I can tell you the moment at which I realized I don't believe in God. I would say there are a lot of instances that chipped away at the belief. And there's a lot I could cite that led up to it. I would say, coming into the seminary, there was a story. So like the Rebbe, I told you, the Rebbe has portraits that of himself that people will keep in his home, in synagogues and Jewish establishments. You know, I worked at a fur coat store in Brooklyn during this time, and they were having it was new, so there was no Rebbe on the wall. And it was like, oh, why don't you have a Rebbe in this store? It brings better success to the business, and it's better to have a portrait. So there was a portrait of the Rebbe in the dormitory, and the story I had heard when I had first entered was that a girl was wearing pants in front of the portrait, and then the dorm mother said to say she was sorry to the portrait for wearing pants in front of like the portrait is a sentient being who's able to perceive what's around him. Like it was very mystical, and it all seemed crazy. That was a story I heard the first night I arrived at the seminary, and I thought, where did I sign up for? And I still had this enough faith to stay for that month and a half. But it was like very clear, very self-evident very quickly that it would not be an environment for me. That it just the enforcement of the rules. I remember I even asked the head rabbi in charge, because the rule about the no pants, I said, well, why do we have that? Why do we even adhere to that? And he said, you know, it's a standard. The girls want to be in an immersive environment. There are some seminaries that don't require a dress code, but we do because the girls who come here want to be surrounded by what they want to become. And I remember thinking, why would I be the straw that breaks the camel? Why would me wearing pants influence someone with so much conviction to even be here at the seminary enough, and that for them to not want to wear skirts? I just remember thinking, you're flattering me. That's a lot of responsibility. To think I have that power. But I even told the rabbi it was like the most joking ultimatum. He's this very long white beard rabbi, and I say to him, if you let me wear pants, I promise I won't marry out. And he just starts laughing like we can't do that.
That's pretty good.
I can't do that. You're just gonna have to follow the rules. You know, keep learning Torah in the classes. Ask the rabbis. You'll get your answers.
Well, when you did feel, you know, yourself deconvert, I guess, was there any sort of, I mean, when I deconverted from Protestantism, and this is a pretty common phenomenon, I felt like I was losing a friend. Like it was a very like, oh, there's a hole in my heart sort of thing. And it was kind of traumatic. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was definitely a thing that I remember. And I felt like losing a friend. And they say it's almost like, even neurologically, it's like losing someone you love, because, you know, you do like have this place in your brain that is kind of like designated for this belief thing. And you have, you know, you pray every night or whatever the thing is, and then that's gone. It was mildly profound for me. How was that for you? And did you have any experience there?
What's been difficult is having friends I've made the past year who are still in the seminaries, and they now have we don't have the same values at all. And They became really good friends with me, but it's like trying to navigate, because I had a discussion with one of them last night. I said, you know, if we were to see each other, I feel like I would be adhering to your laws. Like I wouldn't be able to eat where I'd like, you know, non-kosher restaurant, or do like they pray 3 times a day. So I suppose there might be a time where she'd have to go for 10 minutes or so. I mean, it wouldn't be like, oh, it's, you know, we're going to compromise. There is no compromise within the fanatic beliefs. So it's like, I felt that maybe I could never go on vacation with them or hang out with them for more than, you know, an extended period of time, because we have such different ways of going about our lives. So I do feel this loss of friendship, and I feel loss of perhaps, I feel like a regained a sense of clarity in myself, though, I'll say, like reflecting a lot on the year, thinking that.
Do you feel like you dodged a bullet, like having like maybe not gone down a thing that would have caused you doubts the rest of your life, or is that part of it?
Well, that's also a thing, is that I was really only part of it seriously for about a year and a half or so, a year,
Mhm.
really, really studying. And so I think I feel like fortunate that I didn't spend so much time in these ideas. And I'll say though that, in Jewish law, you make a blessing over every single food item that you eat, and including water. So before, and you say it right as you're about to take the sip of water. And so I still to this day, like I'll be about to take a sip of water and I'll hesitate because in that moment is when I'm meant to say the blessing. And I get frustrated with myself for having that instinct. And I'm trying to just get rid of that. Plus, I'm trying to wear more pants. But the problem is also my clothing is very catered toward a religious
Oh,
lifestyle.
interesting. Yeah,
So I have
interesting.
a lot of clothes now that I'm just like, this could be for business casual, right? Like I could repurpose this black skirt. And I just remember thinking at the seminary, like if I see one more black skirt, I'm going to just it was so traumatizing not being able to choose how you express yourself physically, I would
Oh,
say.
right. That'd be hard for me too. I know. I'm such like an American in that respect too. I'm just kind of like, yeah, I would have a hard time with that. You mentioned earlier, I think before we started recording, but you mentioned Christopher Hitchens, and I think that you've like read some like actual atheist texts at this point, right? Was that a part of your deconversion, and how meaningful are some of those, atheist writers to your life now?
So actually, a lot of my beliefs in the seminary were not deconstructed through much reading. I did read Anthem, of course, but I think it was really I never I was committed to my mind. I was committed to the observations I saw before me. I wasn't going to let myself fully steep into it. I remember thinking it's like I could either I always knew, I was always self-aware that there were contradictions in this. I couldn't to disregard it. You have to really disregard yourself and what you know is rational. So I remember thinking I can't fully reject reason. How do I do that? And in order to have the comfort of this community, have the things I'd like within it, I'd have to do that. I would say it was a lot of me, my own mind telling me this is like you feel it in your body, you feel uncomfortable before you vocalize it, before you even think that you think it. It becomes an unconscious presence in your body, perhaps like a response to things. I would say that coming out of it, I began to really get into like the atheist argument. I wanted it to be not even my own intellect, my own intuition. I wanted to have this like assurance. Like, yes, I have to make sure that I'm doing this for reasons that are like I can intellectually disprove everything I've been like chiseled to know for the past year and a half. I need to tell myself like this is logically this is not able to be proven false. This belief in an idea beyond human comprehension. I need to tell myself, yes, I cannot actually put this into logical form for an argument. Therefore, it is false. And I have to. I'm like always arguing with myself now a lot in my head. I hope I get over it soon though. This like seminary and the way that I perceive myself now, because it's quite frustrating. Because now I feel like reactionary toward religion and religious people, which it's not a good thing. But it's just a lot of people are like Christian in my area, and it's like you're meant to be tolerable of other people, and like,
Right.
yeah, I am. It's difficult when it was so forced upon me, and now I have to go back to secular society where there still are people who believe in religion, and then I exist in that world now. But they're not forcing me, although I guess they would like to, but they're not forcing me to be Christian. But I'm like trying to maintain such a distance from them now, and like everybody who's religious.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's hard not to be a little bit bitter, I think, coming out of a super religious environment because you see that a lot of people are just kind of protecting things that they themselves see to be bullshit. At least that was the sense that I got a little bit. And it's kind of like, why are you like, you not only living this kind of sort of lie, because you probably only like half believe it, but then also kind of sort of forcing it on other people. It's frustrating. I'm still there a little bit myself. So for anyone who is having a similar experience of questioning their faith or maybe just coming out of it, what would you tell that person?
Remember why you left. Remember why you're leaving. In the seminary, I had to hold true that this is not going to work for me. This is not fit for my life. I have nothing to do with these ideas. I looked at the people around me and I thought, I don't want to think like them. I don't want to be like them. I would hear the things they say, which is a reflection of their psyche. I would think to myself, I don't want to think like that. I don't want to perceive information how they perceive information. A lot of it was really like the life I want to build for myself is not the life anyone around me wants to build for themselves. So why would I associate with people who don't want to associate with me? And I left the seminary, and I have to just remember why I left and what I'm going to do from here. And what I'm going to do for here is build the life I was not able to build there. A lot of it is like the simple terms of your own pursuit, your own happiness, which I could not pursue there, and putting that into fruition with your own abilities. It's difficult to leave, but I think I was also squeezed into leaving because it really was either leaving or staying, and staying was sacrificing my own values, my own time for something not worth sacrificing. And it was immoral, I would say, for me to give up so many things inherent to my happiness for the sake of collective benefit, to bring a Messiah. I mean, really, when you boil it down, their ideology. So I would just say that you just remember why you left. Remember why you left.
Okay. That's beautiful. And Serina, great conversation. Thanks for coming on and talking to me today.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you.